So speaking of ethics, I know if we're ever talking about nutrition and then we get into, that you might be healthier if you eat more meat, for example, or more, animal foods, maybe not just the traditional muscle meat that we eat most of the time or whatever. Then there's a lot of people have like these mental blocks because, diets are kind of religious, and then they have these ethical hangups. And then there's all this stuff about the industrial food farming and how it's pretty miserable with, the cows and chickens are in these tiny pens and there's all these horrible things going on. And I would agree with a lot of that. I think a lot of that's pretty bad, pretty crappy, the way that it's set up. And then there's the, hormones and antibiotics and all this stuff that is being used when they're raising these animals. So I know that, from the talk that I saw you give at the conference last year, I know that you've thought about this, and there are a couple things I wanted to see if you could touch on. Well, it's kind of a multi-layer question, so maybe I'll just, I'll kind of summarize it and then you can go where you want with it. But I was going to ask about your perspective on the ethics of like food production as it relates to animals, and then kind of where regenerative farming fits in. And then the follow-up question, maybe I'll save it, but I'll just allude to it in case you want to weave it in there, which is kind of how grass-fed cows are different from industrial cows, and just touching on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, well, that's all part of the same story, yeah. So the ethical side, I find the farther removed from how food is raised, the more people don't understand this. And the vegans are those people. It seems like they're the most disconnected from how food is raised. You don't see the vegans out working on the ranches. The vegans are in the cities, drinking the soy latte and just, proclaiming things that they don't know how it works. So once you go and actually see how the world works, your thoughts change, right? And I had my ideas change too, even learning about, more. As I went, I didn't even know how many deaths were involved growing plants, right? The further I looked into it, the more I saw, oh man, no one's talking about this. No one knows about this, that you're killing a lot of animals to grow plants. And Lear Keith did a whole book on this. She was a vegetarian for decades and ruined her health. She's a vegan and had permanent damage. And you should read her book, The Vegetarian Myth. And I did a podcast with her. She's amazing. But she tried to grow plants without killing animals, and it didn't work. She's having to kill slugs, and she was poisoning things. It just doesn't work, especially on a mass scale. Even to set up monocropped agriculture, which is what 90% of plant foods are based on in the US particularly, it's done by killing entire ecosystems. You have to get rid of entire ecosystems and millions of animals of all kinds just to get this barren wasteland basically of a field to grow the corn, wheat, soy, whatever, anything is pretty much in America is grown in these large systems. That kills animals, it displaces them. It basically is like a genocide of all life. And then while the plants are grown, or while they're harvested, they're killed. Well, while they're grown, they're sprayed chemical pesticides and herbicides and all these things. That kills animals. Then when you're actually using these giant machines to harvest animals, they're chopped up. You get all kinds of like baby deer and ground nesting birds and little animals of all types, mice, they are chopped up to death in these big harvesting combines and stuff. Then there's even more death. Then this is one of the things I learned later, is that I was talking to an Australian farmer who does plant and animal agriculture. He said, okay, I have these fields. He grows both, right? So he has fields of the wheat. When he harvests all that wheat, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of mice that have been relying on that wheat. And now that's all gone. All that's left is the stalk. They don't get any nutrition from the stalk. So now we have hundreds of thousands of mice starving to death and other animals that have relied on this. So now we have, instead of a cow that can live its life on a pasture and then get a bolt gun to the brain and die instantly without feeling it and feed, 100 people. It depends on how you do the math. You can feed a lot of people with a cow for one day, or you could feed a human for like 9 months with a cow. So that is the best case scenario is leaving a cow on pasture for its life, and it has one bad day, and then humans can, get a lot of nutrition from it. Or you could have hundreds of thousands of mice starving to death, a slow, agonizing death from getting all your wheat. So these are the things that no one talks about, no one thinks about. It's very convenient to me. The vegan diets and the vegan sort of agenda, it's kind of, when you get down to it, it seems like it's just a virtue signaling thing where they get to conveniently ignore all the death involved in their food and then blame it on you as the meat eater. Does that make sense? Like, it's very convenient for their side of the story to just not understand or not think about all the deaths that's involved, because it's more down the line, and I get it. So they say, oh, I'm not purposely eating or causing death of an animal, but you are, and to a greater magnitude, because there's so many animals that have to die to get your food. You just don't have to see it. So that's a big part of the moral side. And then you started talking about regenerative ag. So we're talking about, well, what's the solution, right? Because, we don't want animals to suffer. And, we have the same goals as vegans, right? Most people I know, everyone I know, I don't know any people that are just randomly, want to harm animals. Like, no matter what, even if they're not into the regenerative ag space or anything, no one just wants to harm animals. That's insane. They understand that we need animal foods to live, and they're okay with eating animals, but they, would want them to be raised better. So, for one, all cows do spend 2/3 of their life on pasture. Yes, they do then go to a feedlot for the last third of their life, and yes, it's not ideal, and they do get certain other, hormones and antibiotics, and they maybe won't get ideal food. But still, they're not in a pen all their life. They're not in a cage. They are out on pasture. It's a cow-calf operation where this is how it works. They are out on pasture. They're not in a cage. But pigs and chickens, yes, that's a problem. So pigs and chickens, most of it that's produced in the U.S. is pretty bad, right? These are the big, real factory farms that you can picture or seen images of, and they do raise chickens in a warehouse, and there's 1 million in one warehouse. So that's why I actually don't eat much pork and chicken anyway, and I don't think it's particularly nutritious anyway. I think beef has superior nutrition. So we do need to change those systems, but we need to change them on all sides. And yes, it would be better to not finish the animals, the cows or cattle in the feedlot. And that's where the regenerative ag comes in. Is yes, we can keep them on grass their whole life. We can keep chicken and pigs on grass their whole life too. There's pasture-raised pigs and pastured chicken, and there's all different ways to do it, and they all can work in unison in this perfect harmony. Where that's how nature works. And the cows, their fertilizer, they're creating fertilizer from their manure, and you can move them around. Rotational grazing, it's called holistic management. We can move them around, keep them on grass. It's very economical, actually. You can even make it work financially. It's not like this pie in the sky thing. Like, people are making it work. My company Nose to Tail is making it work. We're doing all these practices. And you can do that. You can have pigs go around and they can be out on pasture. They eat all kinds of stuff. I have videos of my pigs. They get into a new pasture and they're just eating everything. They're going nuts over these bushes. I'm like, wow, I didn't know pigs just like eat grass and bushes, and they love it. And then you can have chickens. You can move the chickens in these little chicken tractors, and then you can move them each day. And Joel Salatin does this. You can see videos of him doing it online. He's great. And they can put all their fertilizer or manure in the soil to fertilize it. And then you can move them around in this pattern. So this is the way it should be done. It's all ethical. It's all actually benefiting the soil. It's putting carbon back in the soil. This is just a solution. And I put out a post recently about the headlines, right? You always see the headlines in the media. They're like, especially lately, we to meet climate goals, we need to shift to fake meat, or in the future, we can't eat meat because of the carbon, equivalent, and the CO2 and the methane. Like, this is crazy. The headline should be shift to regenerative agriculture is needed to, help the environment or whatever. not shift to fake meat. Like, that's insane. This makes no sense. This is my problem. That's the same vegan logic where you're just like, I don't want an animal to die, so I'm not going to eat an animal. That's not how it works. You can't just skip ahead. So the real solution is the regenerative ag. It is using animals how they're supposed to be on the land, how it's always been. That's the solution. You can't just skip ahead to, we can't just eat animals. That doesn't make any sense. So, okay, I'll let you jump back in for a second.
No, that was powerful. I mean, I don't know as much as you do about a lot of the stuff you just talked about, just because I know you've spent more time looking into it. But what you were saying about how the monocrops, which like in the United States, just to make it more kind of realistic for people, if you think about probably the soybeans and wheat and corn, like these big monocrops where they're just growing that one thing on these huge fields and all the irrigation and pesticides, but then they have to clear that area out before they start. And then at the end, they have to use their combines to harvest it. And both of those steps sounds like a lot of animals get killed or displaced. And the way you put it as like genocide, because we can imagine, some evil army going across some island or something and just kind of pushing everyone out of the way and then, killing them all or something terrible like that.
That's what happens.
And it's a little bit similar, huh?
It's very similar. That's what happens. Think of a field of corn. There's no life there. There's no life there. Like their goal is to have as little life as possible, and then some life comes back, like the mice, and then they get killed again. Like it's seriously like complete genocide. It's like wipe them all out. Some of them come back, and then wipe them out again.
Yeah. So it's a really. I think for at least some people who are open-minded about this, I know some people have like the religious zeal about it has to be a certain way, but if people are open-minded, then kind of recognizing that at least in the current method of production, that a lot of the plants that we're eating are produced in a way that actually kills more animals than eating animals, then that kind of reframes the ethics a bit for sure. And then the whole story about regenerative farming or regenerative agriculture is really important too. And I'm sure, that people would need to do a little more digging and maybe watch, like your talk from the conference, Low Carb Denver 2020, got into that a little bit and, had some kind of showed the farm up close and talked about that a little bit more. Would be just one example of something that somebody could watch to learn a little bit more about that. But I'm sure there's a lot of other good resources out there.
There's like The Biggest Little Farm is a documentary. There's Sacred Cow, which might be, I don't know, you could probably find that on somewhere. There's other documentaries being made. Kiss the Ground. Just look up regenerative ag is really interesting, and I think more people should learn about it.
Great.